Now that I've tried this twice now, hopefully it doesn't skip frames. Good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're seeing this. I hope you're having a great day. I sure as hell know I am. I know it's been a little bit of time since I've uploaded my last deck tech, so with it I kind of wanted to keep on theme with my monocolor, excluding Miram Karuga shenanigans. So I decided to make mono blue. Our commander today is Min-Wily Illusionist that costs 3 mana, is a gnome wizard, and has power toughness 1-3. With it, this commander has two primary abilities. The first of which is whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1-1 illusion with this illusion gets gets +1/+0 for the number of illusions I control. The second ability is whenever an illusion I control dies, I get to put a permanent onto the battlefield equal to the number of its power whenever it died. With this commander, what I seen in the average deck list was there were too many people running a good number of counter spells, which I know people like to do in blue, but I wanted my version of this deck to be practically solely focused on the fact of triggering that first ability for illusions to try and add more synergy in the sense of if I get consistent draw on everybody's turn, then whenever it gets to back to my turn, I have big stuff. I've been drawing cards, and if they decide to block because it's only a 1 toughness, I get to put something that's equally, if not better, at being more synergistic pieces. The stats of this deck are with the average CMC of the deck with lands is 2.26. Without lands, it is 3.45. Well, for the lands that I do run, there are 34 lands in total, 30 of which are basic islands. With it, the remaining 4 lands basically either get us another trigger of Min-Wily, or they give us consistent card draw whenever we're only able to get one for an opponent's turn to kind of offset us a little bit more. The first of the non-basic lands include Mystic Sanctuary, which enters the battlefield untapped unless we control an island, which, as I stated before, there are 30 of them. The second part of Mystic Sanctuary's ability is whenever it ETBs untapped, I get an instant or sorcery from my grave. For the 2 lands that allow us to draw are Mikoro, Center of the Sea, and Gyrinch Sanitarium. Both tap for colorless and allows us, or each opponent to draw a card. It doesn't matter, especially since we're getting that additional draw on anyone's turn just in case we don't get that second card triggering Min-Wily. The last of the non-basic lands is a Min Wiley trigger and Roadside Reliquary. We pay 2, tap, sacrifice it, and then we draw a card if we have an enchantment and an artifact. Those are 2 separate things, so if we have both of them, we get a Min Wiley trigger. From here, I'm going to start going the ascending CMC amount, and there is a total of 5 1-drops in the deck. Starting us out is Cursed Ruxa. Pay a blue, sack a creature, and then draw a card. With it, sack an illusion, draw a card, put something on the battlefield. That is as simple as a way I can put it. For 1-drop instance, Brainstorm, which gives us an automatic Min Wiley trigger since it specifically says draw 2 or draw 3. Debatably the best artifact in the deck, in my opinion. Skull Clamp gives +1/+0. Doesn't matter. Well, it halfly matters since our toughness is 1. But whenever a creature dies while Skull Clamp is equipped, draw 2. So if Min Wiley is out, put Skull Clamp, equip to an illusion, assuming there's already one out. We'll not only get a death trigger, which doesn't really matter, we'll draw 2 cards, triggering Min Wiley, and we get to put on a battlefield permanent, whatever that power was left. Soul Ring, it's one of the most broken cards in this format, being honest. And to round out the 1-drops, Mystic Remora. The upkeep trigger is not as prominent because we're mostly playing this on like turn 4 after we have Min Wiley out, so that we can get the multiple instances of the draw triggers, especially since by that time, like in turn flow type of scenarios, we get the additional, we throw a wrench in their plans. That's what I'm trying to get at. For the 2 CMC cards, this is where a good number of our big value synergy stuff comes in, because I want a half pseudo engine up and running whenever I get Min Wiley out, so that I can start creating my illusions. One thing I didn't learn till later, Phantasmal Image is an illusion. So no matter what we do, this can either enact as a combo piece, a good synergy piece, or gives us something that's completely bonkers, which I'll be showing later. To deal more damage in combat as we get our number of illusion tokens up, Tetsuko. Creatures with power or toughness 2 or is it 2 or less? No, 1 or less can't be blocked. Well, our toughness is 1, and whenever we have like, I don't know, 5 illusions that are 6/1 each, can't be blocked, we're going to be starting to kill people really quickly. This is where my version of Min Wiley starts to go a little bit different, in the sense of this kind of shows what my game plan is for other things. Vidalcan Engineer. There are a lot of artifacts that have activated abilities for drawing cards, giving us more Min Wiley triggers. Normally, I wouldn't play this card, but with how my version of this kind of panned out, this actually enacts really well for us. For instant speed, Perilous Forays, draw 2, discard, only matters about that first part. It's an automatic Min Wiley trigger. Vision Skeins, each player draws 2 cards. Let me move this out of the way because I don't like that glare for the video. Yes, we're technically giving more to our opponent, but we're also getting a Min Wiley trigger, can get some political favor for the game we're in, yada yada, however you want to take that. This isn't really a 2-drop, but the side effect or side ability, activated ability of this card is 2, and we're really going to be utilizing that really more than its main effect. Step through. The second part is we're just wizard cycling, pay 2, discard it, go search a wizard. I think there's, I want to say 8 in the deck, which are some of our most prominent pieces when it comes to like overall best synergies for it. So one of the combo pieces I do have for this deck is Altar of Dementia. It's a free sacrifice outlet, and it mills. It's one of the 3-card combo, or I'm going to consider it 2.5 because one of them is literally just a land. So that's why I'm considering it 2.5. And then whenever the other piece shows up, I'll show you, or I'll point it out. Next card up, Folio Fancies. 2 mana, players have no maximum hand size. And for 4 mana, we get a Min Wiley trigger. This kind of backs up what I was saying about the Vidalcan Engineer. And yes, I know it could quote unquote be considered a half group hug deck, but in the same sense, I do, spoilers, have Narset in the deck to kind of mitigate that. But whenever I'm getting a lot more value out of it, I don't really consider it a group hug-esque type of thing. But still, continuing on with that same thing, Howling Mine. This is an early play type of thing because on my turn 4, whenever it gets back to me, I'll have a Min Wiley trigger already starting to go off. A card that gives us good selection, but overall doesn't really add to our game plan. It's just like a win more-esque card. Idol of Oblivion. Tap it, draw a card if I've created a token this turn, and then can get a Eldrazi, but that is not the most prominent thing. Mind Stone. Add colorless, but it draws a card. Strionic Resonator. Double the illusion or death trigger once for Min Wiley. Because if we use Strionic Resonator to get our first one, our first illusion, we copy it. Well, now we have 2 illusions on there, and I can, that's also like a quote-unquote mana reducer for the amount of illusions I need to start placing down other CMCs that are lower. Since this is a massive draw deck, Thought Vessel, no maximum hand size. And then to round out the 2 CMC cards, Urza's Tome has the activate ability for 3 that draw a card, discard unless I exile a historic from grave. Ugh, 1 second. Sorry, off. Oh. 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 My neck was getting sore there for a second. Next up is Narset for 3. Already said that before. It prevents more than 1 draw per turn, so all of the additional card draw that I would be giving my enemy doesn't matter at all. Loyal Drake. At the beginning of combat, if I control my commander, draw a card. If I have no other card draw in hand, that gives me a Min Wiley trigger on my turn, especially if Min Wiley was there before my draw step. Cryptoplasm, by far my favorite clone that I have found over time. Main reason being, it retains the name Cryptoplasm. So, if I really wanted to, I could put down Cryptoplasm copying Min Wiley. Min Wiley no longer has the name Min Wiley, it is Cryptoplasm. So, I'm getting double the illusions. Instant speed, Arcane's Epiphany, draw 2, discard, and then hello, Icy Prophet, or Ice Prophet. Please do not mind me. I have been awake for like the last 13 hours after my last shift, so I need something to occupy my time. Also, were you saying nice trick to the Cryptoplasm part? Icy is fine? Okay, hell yeah. I didn't want to make you upset or anything. Ugh. But yeah, I've used Cryptoplasm in a couple of my decks. Whenever I found out that Cryptoplasm keeps the name Cryptoplasm and bypasses the legendary clause, I had it in a couple of different decks. Like I threw it in Miram, I threw it in Kaikar, I put it in Tatyova, and nowadays it's in Min Wiley. Good to remember that. Lots of copies these days, yeah. I ended up taking it out of Tatyova and replacing it with what is it called? Double Major. That's what the card is called. Next up, our Frantic Search. Draw 2 and untap 3 lands. For God's sake, discard a card. Read the runes. Draw where X is equal to the number of cards I draw. Then I have to sacrifice a permanent. But if we're doing that on a different opponent's turn, we're getting a Min Wiley trigger. We're also sacrificing an illusion depending on the CMC. We're putting something on the battlefield, which something I haven't mentioned before is if we sacrifice an illusion that has 1 power, we're allowed to actually put a land onto the battlefield. So indirectly, if we need to, oh, Icy Prophet, thank you so much for the follow. I just seen that. Continuing on, if we sacrifice an illusion, we are allowed to put a land onto the battlefield because they're considered zero, and Min Wiley doesn't say a non land permanent, it just says a permanent with less CMC on it. Next up, Stern Lesson. Draw 2, discard, create a Power Stone token. The Power Stone token can't be used to cast non-creature spells. Yeah, that is gross. Tragic Lesson. Draw 2, discard, unless return a land to hand. Which, if you have something, or not something, if you have Mystic Sanctuary, you can return that, replay it, get an instant, and also have another Min Wiley trigger. Commander Sphere. It draws a card without tapping. Yes, it sacrifices itself, but if we need that one additional card, that is, well, what we need to get the Min Wiley trigger. Grafted War Gear. It sacrifices permanents, so whenever we have our board builds up, if we can't find our combo piece, Altar of Dementia, but we find Grafted War Gear or what was it before, the Read the Runes, I think. Yeah. Then Grafted War Gear gives us our sacrifice by just re-equipping it across the illusions, putting more stuff onto the battlefield, and creating a massive snowball effect. Heraldic Banner. It's an anthem and a rock. Well, in this deck specifically, it also enacts as basically saying, oh, you get to put an additional 1 CMC stuff onto the battlefield for whatever illusion. So let's say we have 3 illusions on field. They're going to be 4 power. Sacrifice 1 to the Grafted War Gear. Put Heraldic Banner down, naming blue because the illusions are blue. And now we basically just quote unquote got another illusion by sacrificing an illusion because we got that anthem effect. Next up, Jaloom's Tome. Pay 3, loot. One thing I'll say about this deck is whenever it's not the major higher CMC like draw cards, there are a lot of cards that are the one like draw 1 or loot type of effects, which is why I was talking about earlier with like Vidalcan. I was going to say Vidalcan Ori. No, I don't have Vidalcan Ori in this deck. Vidalcan Engineer. One of my personal favorite pet cards, being honest. Midnight Clock. After, I want to say 4 turns, it just wheels our hand. So A, it's a Min Wiley trigger, and B, Clock is an absolute beast. Oh yeah, I love this card so much. And B, it also can be dropped for free with Min Wiley and acts as a mana rock. Network Terminal. Kind of the same thing as Midnight Clock, acts as a mana rock, but it doesn't wheel our hand, it just loots. Temple Bell. Each player draws a card, but it has no cost for tapping it. Curse of Verberosity. It's, of course, it's a curse. With it as well, our opponents also draw cards, but if Narset's on field, that doesn't matter as much as stated before. And then last one for the 3 CMC is Ever Watching Threshold. It is, the best way to describe it is, it's incentivification for our opponents not to attack us, because if they attack us, they draw us a card, and they just did half the work for me, so I don't have to expend as many resources into drawing an additional card with Temple Bell, Jaloom's Tome, etc., etc. Before I continue, how's your day going? I was going to say Jaloom. I don't know why. How's your day going, Icy Prophet? Let's put those over there. Ugh. It's great. These commanders seem awesome. Hell yeah. Being honest, I always try to do my best to try and make like more unique S commanders, or ones that partially get overshined, or the popular ones that get taken in a different direction. Like, if you look up on YouTube the exact same name as my Twitch, if you scroll down, there will be, I think I have 4 or 5 different deck techs on my YouTube channel. One of which on EDH Rec only has 14 uh, deck list, all of which are mine. Like, it's my mono green deck, and I absolutely love it. The other one I've made a couple of videos about is my mono red deck, which is Valdut Keeper of the Flame from Dominaria. And that is the commander that made me re-love Commander. Wizard is a good creature type to have too. I wonder if be better gnomes one day. True. I know it's not something that's been heavily elaborated on in general, but it would be see what a gnome quote unquote tribe would become. Continuing on with the 4 CMC cards. First up is Archmage Amaterius. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, draw a card. Very simple, yet very effective. Potentially the strongest one card in this deck if it doesn't go unchecked is Chronozoa, which has Vanishing 3. Whenever it loses its last time counter, sacrifice it. If it had no time counters on it, copy it. It also gets Vanishing 3 again, so it basically just doubles itself every time. Gnomes have a mysterious story. They're like, for the little bit of time in D&D that I played, I actually was an hold on, was I a gnome or a half elf? Or not half elf, half dwarf. Hill dwarf? I don't know, I'm exhausted. Continuing on. Curiosity Crafter. Flying, no maximum hand size. Whenever a token deals combat damage, draw a card. So if we have multiple Min Wiley token illusion tokens deal damage, we're going to be drawing a card, and depending on the number of tokens we do, we'll more than likely get at least one trigger. Jace's projection gets +1/+1 for each time we counter anyway. Every time we draw a card, and then has 4 mana. Has 4 mana. Put a loyalty counter on a Jace. Spark Double. It's another clone. It's also an illusion. Bypasses legendary clause like Cryptoplasm, giving us another Min Wily. Talran, Sky Summoner. There's a good number of instants and sorceries in the deck. If we're dropping this for free, we're just getting additional value accumulated over time. Main reason I like to run this is because the tokens have flying. Toothy, Imaginary Friend. Not gonna lie, I just got this card, so I actually need to reread it. Whenever draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Toothy. Okay, whenever it leaves, it draws for each +1/+1 counter on it. This thing gets massive, and with some of the other stuff in the deck, this can literally get some of our biggest beaters in the deck out for free, especially since it is an illusion. Now, another card that's indirectly one of the strongest is Vidalcan Humiliator. Whenever we attack, if we have Metalcraft, our creatures, or our opponent's creatures, become 1/1 with no abilities. Now, do they want to risk whatever creature they have out to trade with an illusion, which also has 1/1, but I also get a permanent onto the battlefield with it. So it basically just replaces itself. This adds a lot of risk reward for our opponents, in our favor anyway. Another instant, Case the Joint. Draw 2 cards and then look at the top of each opponent's library. Reign of Revelation. Draw 3 cards, discard a card. Gives us another Min Wily trigger. Inscription of Insight. Acts as a gives us an illusion, I believe. Yeah. Gives us an illusion, gives us a Min Wily trigger, or bounces stuff on the field to allow us to do more plays. Silver Scrutiny. If X is 2 or less, we can cast it with Flash. Draw X cards. Well, for 4 mana, draw 2. That's a Min Wily trigger. Biden of Thassa. When a creature deals combat damage, draw a card. May draw a card. Well, if we have multiple creatures doing combat damage, we're going to be getting a lot of cards that can either get us another Min Wily trigger or give us a good permanent to put on the battlefield. Nice heavy hitter in the deck, Maskwood Nexus. It turns all of our other stuff into illusions, which, when they die, they just replace themselves because they're illusions, and Min Wily sees that they're illusions. And the last of the 4 CMC is Unwinding Clock. We have a bunch of artifacts that require tap abilities. So having this quote unquote Seedborn Muse effect in mono blue is amazing. Also, I will be right back because I just ran out of coffee. Oh, I'm back. I look at all the other gnomes, some pretty good ones, but not many options in blue. Oh, that's pretty upsetting to hear, not gonna lie. I kind of hope they expand on it a bit, being honest. A couple of them have actually decent abilities. I might have to actually look at those. Because if there are, if they have some synergistic abilities that I could use, I might actually get some of them. Next up for 5 CMC. Please do not be mad if I butcher this. I've never known how to properly say this. Imareth. Flying and ward 4? Yeah. Flying and ward 4 whenever it's untapped. Whenever it deals combat damage, draw a card. Then if I have less than 3 cards in hand, I draw the difference. 1 cheats in artifacts from your hand. Oh, that sounds pretty cool. Now that we've gotten to this point in the deck tech, the other combo piece that I brought up for the 2.5 card combo is Maloku, the Clouded Mirror. With it, this, a free sacrifice outlet, Min Wiley, and at least 1 land makes an infinite combo of infinite ETBs, infinite LTVs. If you have Altar of Dementia like I do, infinite mill, Yeah, I don't know what I was going to say after that. I'm not going to lie. Ooh, nice dragon. Thank you. I ended up getting it from my LGS because I had some credit. Made me very happy. One card that is 5 mana, but I never use the 5 mana for because of the alternative casting cost. Gush. Return 2 untapped islands. Draw 2 cards. The only counterspell I run in this deck, because it also gives me a Min-Wiley trigger in worst case scenario. Mystic Confluence. Choose 3 modes. You may choose a mode more than once. Balance the land, counterspell unless they pay 3 and draw a card. And the card that potentially scales the most, depending on the players I'm facing, is Mind's Eye. Whenever an opponent draws a card, I may pay 1 to also draw a card. Well, this also synergizes really well with Moloku, Center of the Sea, Gyre Reach Sanitarium, Howling Mine, because if I have Howling Mine and Mind's Eye on field, and I have 6 mana untapped, then I get a Min-Wiley trigger every turn, because that's 1 for their draw step, and then 1 for the Howling Mine trigger, or whatever additional card draw I give people. And the last card that's in the 5 CMC is Gilded Lotus. It is one of the only other artifacts that give us at least half the mana we put into it. As y'all know, I don't really play many artifacts in this deck, so with it, this gives us at least 1 trigger of something, and being able to cheat it out with Min-Wiley makes it pretty good. For the 6th CMC, we have Jace. Whenever we draw our second card during our turn? No, each turn, which synergizes well with Min-Wiley, we put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Also has the ability to draw a card, which, if that's the only other thing we have out besides Min-Wiley, gives us a Min-Wiley trigger on our turn. Plus, it bumps our board, especially since how we're running this deck is trying to draw a bunch of cards on other people's turns. Debatably the best Planeswalker in this deck is Mordenkainen. First ability has a draw thing for +2, or you could -2 it immediately after playing it and be able to put an illusion down onto the battlefield that has power and toughness equal to double your hand. I don't even remember what the ultimate is, but the fact that we put in a card that's an illusion that is power toughness double the hand and being able to immediately sacrifice it to put anything onto the battlefield as long as it's a permanent is beyond bonkers. Do I have Gitaxian Probe? No, I do not. And if I did have one, I would be putting it in Kaikar. Dog Illusion! Dude, it is so good. Like, there's been points where it's been a 34. Like, it is ridiculous. I should not be able to put something that is 33 CMC onto the battlefield for free. The last of the Planeswalkers I run is Tezzeret Cruel Machinist. Draws a card and then allows us to hand dump our hand for his ultimate, making 5/5s. And since we're drawing a shit ton of cards, an alternate win con for the deck is a Timsis, which the tap ability is at least draw 2 cards and then discard, giving us a Min Wily trigger at instant speed. And whenever it deals combat damage, I may reveal my hand, and if I have 6 different cards with varying CMC, which is very easy to do in this deck, by the way, I just win the game. It may be a little bit scummy, but you still see the Sphinx enter the battlefield. But whenever I have a hand of like 15 cards, you know I'm going to... you can't get hit by it, basically. And the card that I ended up splurging to get, because it was too good not to get, and probably, in my opinion, one of the best investments for this deck, Consecrated fucking Sphinx. Ooh. When an opponent draws a card, draw 2. Whenever I first seen Min Wily, I immediately thought of Consecrated Sphinx. I didn't even want to get one because I didn't like the concept of playing this fucker. But, not gonna lie, whenever I made the deck, I realized, oh, this gets so much better, actually. Like 2 weeks later, no, not even 2 weeks later. Like a couple of days afterwards, I started working at Macy's, and with my first paycheck, I ended up getting myself a Consecrated Sphinx. Sphinx gamer, I've never played a Sphinx, but it's definitely a thing. So one of my old personal favorite decks was actually a combination of a Djinn and a Sphinx. And with it, that was my original mono blue deck. The reason I ended up taking it apart is it just wasn't my playstyle. I didn't enjoy it personally. And the combination was Siani, Eye of the Storm, and Eligeth, Crossroad Augur. Siani, 4 mana whenever it attacks, scry X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Eligeth, whenever I scry cards, I instead draw that many. A little bit later along, I tried making that playstyle work for me by turning it into an Is It deck. By switching Siani to Karok the Thumbless, which that deck was, oh my god, that deck was fun, don't get me wrong. But I just didn't find the play pattern enjoyable, to be honest. And personally, to round out this deck, the last 3 cards are all 7 CMC. Starting out, because I'm a mean motherfucker and decided to get this boy whenever he tanked in price. Gentataxius, Progress Tyrant. Double R spells, say no to your first spell, basically. Next up, Nezahal, Primal Tide, no maximum hand size. Can't be countered. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, draw a card, which depending on how they have their decks built, gives us a Min Wily trigger without me having to put in effort. And I can discard 3 cards to return it to hand at the beginning of the end step. Sorry, battlefield, not hand. And finally, to round out this deck is Thought Reflection. If I would draw a card, I instead draw 2. This doubles all of our draw triggers, which whenever I have, I want to say 15, 20 cards that say draw a card and I need 2, I play this down for free after sacrificing a illusion. I only need 1 activation for me to get another Min Wily trigger instead of having to A, dump a shit ton of mana, and B, commit more resources to getting those single draw triggers. Well, that was my Min Wily deck profile. Let's get this thing reshuffled up. Being honest, I haven't really been able to play this in person because, like I said before, right at a month ago, I started working at Macy's, but I'm not now. So now that I had all of the pieces in, I decided that it was time to make a deck for it. Also, Icy Prophet, I'm going to be turning this into a video with it. As well, I'm going to be linking the original deck list for Moxfield onto it. So if you would like to go back and rewatch like the beginning parts of it where I go over the stats, the CMC, land count, etc., that should be finished after a certain point. I plan on having it personally done like okay, my mic's back on. Only thing is I have more power stuff like okay, so I actually do have Heraldic Banner in the deck. I did have Illusion Lord in it. I think it was called Lord of the Haze. I did have it in the deck, but the reason I ended up taking it out of the deck is I didn't want the +1 to toughness because that messes up my skull clamp plays, and that also messes up my Tetsuko Umazawa Fugitive plays. So I ended up taking those two, or not those two. I ended up taking out the Lord of the Haze from the deck. You were thinking of Coat of Arms? Oh, okay. That makes a little more sense. But yeah, whenever I was building this deck, the thing I was wanting to focus on most was trying to get that card draw so that I could consistently get the Min Wiley triggers. Because the one thing I didn't like about the... Also, I can actually switch this now. Oh, nope, that one doesn't work. Ah! Yeah, I know what you mean with that. But continuing on with what I was saying is... Actually, I might be able to... Nope, that one doesn't work. Well, I'm actually going to just do yay. Oh, I forgot that's inverted shit. Okay. What was the last little bit I was saying? Ugh. Oh yeah, I was thinking of coat of arms. I know it doesn't work with all your stuff, but a coat and play will be bonkers for you. Requires removal. Yeah, that is true. I do play a bunch of different uh different creature types into the deck, but also with that, fuck it. I'm going to do something. The thing is, my coat of arms is in a different deck. I use it in my Kaikar deck. There we go. So that I can have a little bit more of a one-on-one-esque. No worries then. I appreciate it. And then, give me 1 second. But yeah, I was telling you earlier, even though this is an alternate art of like not magic legal, of the decks that I have, I've been a big fan of Max was for tribal decks too. I actually do have Maskwood Nexus into the deck because of how many different cards I have that are non illusions. Being able to generate them into illusions gives me so much fucking value. Like, it is ridiculous. Like, oh, let me just throw down Maskwood Nexus. Now this Consecrated Sphinx is also an illusion. Now, do I use my removal for it and then let him get, like, Mind's Eye out? Or Drowned Ruska, which will give me even more value, etc., etc. But yeah, for the main decks that I have deck text on for my YouTube channel are... Where are you at? Oh yeah, I forgot I reversed it. Do I? No. Okay, so one of them I don't have any more for my actual decks, but for the ones that I've constantly upgraded and have fun with have been these two. This one is an alternate art that my friend ended up printing off, and it is Valduk, Keeper of the Flame, my mono red deck. The other one I use a good number of the time is this bad boy right here, Halsin, Emerald Arch Druid. I love this thing so fucking much. It makes me so upset that it has been overlooked from the Commander's Baldur's Gate set, because that thing is so good. What it does is it turns whatever token you have on to your battlefield into a 4/4 bear, green bear, in addition to its other types. So the whole concept of the deck is I just make whatever token I can and hit people with a shit ton. That can be Eldrazi Scions, Saprolings, Thopters, food tokens, clues. It doesn't matter. Like, the way I've taken that deck is the way it works is I smack people for a shit ton with food and treasure tokens, because the way I ended up taking it is Academy Manufacturer. There are so many different food, treasure, and clue like synergies in mono green. This thing is bonkers. Like, okay, with it being a 4/4 bear, let me drop down Greater Good, pay 1 mana, turn a food token into a draw 3. Or a draw 4, discard 3. How is that not bonkers? Like, not even... I just love the deck. I'm sorry. You know what? Where is it at? No, that's rule 0. Oh, yeah. I know where it's at. I'm actually going to move things back to the other camera. And I'm just going to also alter the stream title to tatyova. Now, which one is the tatyova? There we go. Min Wiley. I like Tatyova too. Interesting fact before I switch things back over. So, whenever I first, like, this is 2018, I think. I was just starting to get into Magic. This is Dominaria block. I come across Tatyova Bethnic Druid, the Commander's Quarters video. At that time, I was slowly starting to kind of army crawl away from Yu-Gi-Oh! Then whenever I found out that what I was being rewarded for doing what the game wanted me to do, and made the like I got the deck for $23. Tatyova was my very first commander, and I absolutely love it. I took it apart for a couple of years, but here in the last like 2-3 months, I ended up rebuilding it because I missed playing the deck. Tatyova was where my green-blue focus went after Prophet of Krufix was banned. Oh yeah, I feel that. I know that was honestly a massive hit, along with later along, I believe, my personal favorite commander of all time being Golos. Don't get me wrong, I understand Golos was a very much needed hit because everyone and their mama was playing it and added so much value, especially being able to cheat its commander tax if you destroyed it by searching out a land. But just playing 5-color Golos artifacts and artifact creatures was pure gold to me, honestly. It was by far one of the funnest things I have ever built up until whenever I started really learning my own play style with Magic. Because in general, with me, I really like to... My personal preference is if I'm making tokens and I'm smacking people, I'm a happy camper, being honest. Golos and Tatyova are my first two. I believe that Golos was the first commander I ended up making after Tatyova, being honest. If I can remember stuff right. Let's get that right in there. And this right here. Good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're seeing this. I hope you're having a great day. I sure as hell know I am. For those that don't know, my name is Marcus D. Stonelord Exothermal, and today I'm going to be bringing to you my Tatyova Bethnic Druid Commander deck. With this, Tatyova is a 5-mana Simic Identity Merfolk Druid with Power Toughness 3/3. Has an ability of whenever a land enters the battlefield, draw a card and gain a life. With it, my personal version of Tatyova is manlands, which may sound a little bit weird, but whenever I tell you that having 32 16/16 tramplers is pretty fucking funny, especially whenever their islands and mountains, islands and forests. With it today, I'm going to be doing things a little bit different. I didn't pull out my lands and stuff like that, so I'm kind of just going to be going along with how the deck is already shuffled. With it, whenever I do the video editing for this, I'll be placing the stats and stuff right in here. So with it, the main premise of the deck is 1. Play Tatyova. 2. Play a bunch of lands, which is giving us a bunch of life and drawing us cards, and finding a way to turn our lands into creatures. With this, the main gimmick of the deck is through a card that was released this last year that is referred to as Mirror Box. Legendary rule doesn't apply. Each legendary creature gets +1/+1. And then each non-token creature that shares a name gets +1/+1 for each creature that has the same name. With it, this is the easiest way to pump our manlands, our basic manlands. This is also what allows us to get our forest and island to at most be +16/+16. Of course, this is. How am I trying to put this? I don't know how I should put this. Either or. No legendary rule is so fun. LOL, breaking rules and such. Yup. And being honest, there's a couple of different ways to actually do that in this deck. I love it, being honest. But for this personal deck tech, there are there's no major infinite combos or anything like that. It is very simple gameplay. It is a sense of play lands, turn them into creatures, and hit people for a shit ton. Mirror Box is basically one of our very few game enders in the deck. One of the ways we turn our lands into creatures is Rude Awakening, turning them into base power 1/1, 2/2. Into 2/2 creatures, and then if we entwine it, we can also untap all lands. Another win con is Ormos, which prevents us from decking ourselves out. Before anyone asks, no, I don't have Laboratory Maniac, Thassa's Oracle, etc. for this deck. This is my version of it in Ormos, Archive Keeper. A personal pet card of mine, and one of the ways I give trample to my manlands is Aggressive Mammoth. It's an 6/6. It's a 6 mana 8/8 trampler that gives other creatures trample. Simple as that, and it's amazing. Another thing that gives keywords, but only for our land creatures, is Tatyova, Steward of the Tides. Land creatures have flying. when a land ETBs, if it's the second one? Oh no. If I control 7 or more, then I get to have one of my lands be a 3/3. Natural Affinity, another way to turn our creatures into man lands. Multani, Yavamaya's Avatar gets +1/+1 for each land, and it also returns 2 lands if it's in the graveyard. Multani, anyway, not the lands. Nissa Who Shakes the World doubles our green mana. Grow from the Ashes puts 2 different lands onto the battlefield, giving us 2 Tatyova triggers. Boundless Realm gets us a shit ton of lands onto the battlefield, giving us a bunch of Tatyova triggers equal to the number of attacking creatures. Which, whenever I'm attacking, I'm going to be attacking with a bunch of creatures, either through Rampaging Balos, the actual main lands, etc., etc. Animist Awakening. It gets us a bunch of lands from off the top of our deck. We're a landfall deck. We're going to have a bunch of lands onto the battlefield. And then that's going to be a bunch of Tatyova triggers. Budoka Gardener allows us to put a land onto the battlefield, giving us another Tatyova trigger. Monumentous Fall. Sack a creature, draw cards equal to its power. Tatyova is a base 3/3. That's a harmonize, basically. Yes, we're getting rid of our commander, but if we're getting rid of something that's a little bit bigger, then yeah, we can draw a bunch of cards, especially in combination. I didn't mean to do that. In combination with Hunter's Prowess. Gives +3/+3 to a creature, being Tatyova. Whenever it deals combat damage, draw that many cards. So, since those 2 cards came back to back, one of my personal favorite things to do is Hunter's Prowess, put it on Tatyova, swing for 6, draw how many cards I get, if I do get to draw cards, and then put a land on the battlefield, draw another card in main phase 2. Then, depending on how everything is looking, Monumentous Fall, draw an additional 6 cards. Sylvan's Awakening makes all of our creatures 2/2 trample, haste, reach, trample? Yeah, no trample, but 2/2 reach, haste, indestructible. Earth Surge gives our creature, each land creature +2/+2. Ensnare, return 2 lands, which will give us more land drops for Tatyova. Also allows us to swing whenever our board is built up. Scapeshift. Sack any number of lands, go search that many onto the battlefield. That's a bunch of Tatyova triggers for 4 mana. Plus, it can actually expand the amount of mana we get with Scapeshift if because we're able to search out any land. Growth Spiral, draw a card, may play an additional land this turn. If we play the land, this is a 2 mana draw 2, gain a life. Sylvan Scrying, search for a land card and put it into your hand, shuffle your library. With it, we can search any land. It doesn't say basic land type, it's 2 mana. Beast Whisperer, cast a creature spell, draw a card. Very simple. We may not have the most creatures, but we still have enough that it's worth it to actually run, in my opinion. Brainstorm. It's card selection for 1 mana. Kamal's Will. Makes all of our lands 1/1s. Aquatuck's Will. 1 mana. Turn something into an island. If I control a merfolk, Tatyova's a merfolk, draw a card. Opt. Scry, draw a card. Perilous Forays. Pay 1, sacrifice a creature, search for a basic land type, or a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped. Those are all basic lands. Crawling Baron. This allows itself to put up +1/+1 counters. Mono green bounce land in Jungle Basin, giving us an additional Tatyova trigger. Mishra's Factory. Pay 1 mana, it becomes a man land till end of turn with base power 2/2. Myriad Landscape. Budget players fetch land. Ghost Town allows it to put the land into our hand during our opponent's turn. Depending on what we have on field, we can put that onto the battlefield with like the Budoka Gardener from earlier, giving us another Tatyova trigger. Simic Growth Chamber, bounce land. Rejuvenating Springs. ETBs tap unless we control... No, unless we have 2 or more opponents. It mana fixes us in a 2-color deck. Terramorphic Expanse. Budget players fetch land. Saprazan Cove. Is it Cove? Scary, not... Saprazan Scary. ETBs with 2 counters on it, remove a counter, add 2 blue of mana to it. Whenever it has no counters on it, sacrifice it. Being honest, it ain't the biggest thing not being able to get it back, but there is a little bit of synergy with it being sacrificed. Also, one thing I forgot to mention earlier, Mirror Box is the only artifact I run in the deck. Evolving Wilds, budget fetch land. Ghost Quarters, sacrifice a destroy land, go search for, the owner of that land goes searches for a basic land type. Well, if I use this on myself, play it, sacrifice it, destroy land, I'm getting 2 triggers and 2 triggers of Tatyova. Sylvanite Temple. ETB's tapped. Tap, add a blue, or I can tap, sacrifice it, add double blue. Rogue's Passage makes stuff unblockable. Coral Atoll. Mono blue bounce land. Thespian Sage. It becomes a target land that I would prefer, being honest. Blighted Cataract. Sacrifice it, draw 2 cards. MDFC. I honestly don't remember what this card does. I just know it's decent enough for me to run it. Boghead Recovery. The second MDFC returns target card from graveyard to our hand. With it, this is one of like the break glass if emergency-esque cards, because of the fact it is very simple to consistently draw a shit ton of cards, having to discard them. I think there's been a total of one time where I've actually messed up and got something else that wasn't my win con because I thought it was in my deck. These next three cards are more or less just a package that works surprisingly well into this deck. Is Psychic Spiral. Shuffle our cards from our graveyard into our deck, and then we mill an opponent for that number. Court of Cunning. Any number of players may, or you may have any number of players mill, and then if Monarch, I believe it's 14? No, 10. And whenever not the Monarch, it's 2. Psychic Corrosion. Whenever I draw a card, target player puts the top 2 of their library into the graveyard. With Tatyova, we draw a shit ton in this deck. Whenever I brought up that the sacrificing and destroying of our own lands didn't matter as much, main reason I said that is Titanium Proctor of Argoth. Whenever a land enters the graveyard from the battlefield from our control, we get a 5/3 green elemental token. Reflection of Letjara. Choose a creature type. Whenever we do one of that creature type, copy the spell. Rune Crab. This thing is absurdly busted, especially in this deck. With how much land we play, this thing can get out of control. In one of my more friendly games, I think this card single-handedly milling my opponents for 42 or something like that. Seed the land. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, its controller puts a 1/1 snake. We're going to be putting a lot more lands into play typically than our opponent. Rampaging Baloth. Landfall, 4/4 green beast. Territorial Scythe Cat. Landfall, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It also has Trample. This thing can get absurdly huge. Simic Ascendancy. Alternative win con in the game, and also enacts as a mana dump just in case things go a little bit sour for us. Fight Rigging. Hideaway 5, and then puts +1/+1 counters on Tatyova. We can play it whenever we have power 7 or greater. Hydra's Growth. Put a +1/+1 counter at the beginning of my upkeep. Double the number of counters on it. One of the things I ended up doing with this deck is I ended up also throwing in a minor +1/+1 counter package just in case I needed to start to swing with Tatyova, keep it back as a blocker, because at certain points the deck can enact quote-unquote a little slow, or can be in a more vulnerable position because of being able to be so reliant on our landfall. Weaver of Currents, 3 mana, adds 2. Avatar of Growth searches 2 lands, giving us 2 land triggers. Irenicus' Vile Duplication lets us create a copy of Tatyova because it doesn't, the copy is not legendary, and it also has flying. Clone Legion. For each creature target player controls, I may create a copy of it. This can get absurd, especially whenever I have a good number of my other lands onto the field. Or not lands, clones onto the battlefield that are Tatyovas. Double Major. Create a copy of target creature. If it's legendary, the copy is not legendary. This is a 2 mana Tatyova. Muogen of Cryptic Dreams. Remove the indestructible counter. I get 3 permanents that are copies of whatever target I want. Altered Ego. Enters has a copy of target creature, except it has X +1/+1 counters on it. This spell can't be countered. Progenitor Mimic. At the beginning of upkeep, if Progenitor Mimic isn't a copy of any creature, I may have it become a copy of a creature. Tamriel Safekeeping. This card grants indestructible to our creature. Ugh. A fun card I wanted to put into the deck that I don't have a place elsewhere for. Unexpected Result. Shuffle my library, reveal the top card. Depending on what it is, I either get to play it for free, add it to my hand, or if it's a land, put it on the battlefield and add Unexpected Result back to hand. Urban Evolution. Draw 3, may play an additional card for turn. Gush. Return 2 islands to hand, draw 2. Gretchen Titchwaylow, 2 mana, has the activated ability of 2 Simic colors, 2 and Simic colors. Draw a card, may play an additional land this turn. Dreamscape Artist. Discard a card, sacrifice a creature, go put 2 basic lands, or is it basic lands? Yeah, 2 basic lands onto the battlefield, giving us 2 Tatyova triggers. Risen Reef. When it ETBs or another elemental ETBs, I may look at the top 3, reveal land, put it onto the battlefield. Kefnet the Mindful. Flying indestructible, can't attack unless I have 7 or more lands. Pay 3, draw a card, then I may return a land permanent to its owner's hand. Well, I'm going to be returning my own land, putting it back onto the battlefield, drawing an additional card, and gaining a life. Kuda, the Boundless Sky. Has flying. Whenever it dies, I'm going to be searching for 2 basic lands. 3 lands, sorry, not basic lands. Cultivate. Search 2 basic lands, put one of them onto the battlefield, the other into your hand. Abundance. Whenever I would draw a card, I may choose land or non-land, and then I reveal from the top till I reveal one of the chosen. And then the last card of this deck is Court of Bounty. At the beginning of my upkeep, I may put a land onto the battlefield. If I'm the monarch, I get to put a land or a creature onto the battlefield. I don't really care about being the monarch for it unless I have the Court of Cunning out. But besides that, I just want the additional land onto the battlefield, giving me another Tatyova trigger. Either or, that's what I have for my Tatyova mainland deck. With it, Icy Prophet, thank you for coming by the stream. I hope you have a great rest of your day, homie. With it, I also hope you check out my other deck techs on my YouTube. Link to it is going to be in my on my Twitch. It'll have my my YouTube, my Instagram, and what was the last one? I know it has those two. So if you ever want updates like that, check out the other deck tags, whatever you would like. That's where you would find it. If you don't see those links, then what I would recommend doing is looking up my my Twitch tag for Instagram and YouTube, because there will be the exact same thing found at Real Exothermal. Either or, I hope you have a great rest of your day, homie,